Yo, we going live from the Windy City Heat. Kings Collective, where the real ones meet. Mic check, 1, 2, clear the tweet. Best new podcast, we taking a sheet. From Chi-Town blocks to the ear of the masses. Dropping heavy knowledge, no rose-colored glasses. Talking king moves, not just pawns and passes. Street philosophy, no hall passes. K-I-N-G, sound out, feel the vibe. Collective with a K, where truths reside. Nothing smoother, no need to hide. Chicago pride, we on this ride. K-I-N-G, sound out, feel the vibe.
Kings Collective Podcast. Get in tune.
If y'all know like I know, y'all could have been anywhere in the world. But today, we're at Oyer's Barbershop for a cut-up edition of the Kings Collective Podcast. This is where we come to the barbershop to salute our legends. Like a few weeks ago, we had Ramonski Love, and this week, I am honored. I am definitely honored to have a Chicago legend, Mr. OG, Mr. Rick. He's a culture historian, a storyteller, a leader preserving the voices of black entrepreneurship, also inside of community transformation, through platforms like the OG Chopping Block and the original OGs. He's been a key figure in discussions about Chicago evolution, systematic challenges, and the legacy of the OGs. Mr. Rick has witnessed firsthand the rise of evolution, black-owned businesses in the city of Chicago, and his insight after the windows of Chicago rich history and future. Today, we are diving into his experiences, his wisdom, and his reflection and leadership, culture, and the movements that have shaped generations. And today, we are here, Mr. OG, Mr. Rick. Make some noise! My brother, how do you feel, brother?
I am fantastic, man.
And you-
That's a hell of an introduction, bro.
Oh man, brother, thank you, brother. I'm trying my best. So listen. You said something when you first walked in. You said I can't complain.
Because ain't nobody listening.
Cause ain't nobody listening.
You dig? So it's a waste of time.
It's a definitely waste of time. So when I first was introduced to you, I'm a late sleeper. So I be up in the middle of the night.
I get it.
And I was watching a few of your interviews, and I watched you interview Fred Hampton Jr. I believe you had Larry Hoover Jr. on there as well.
Correct.
And I'm
Lil
watching
Larry.
this, yes, Lil Larry. And I'm on there and I'm watching this. I say, God, I said, I gotta have this man on my podcast. I have to. Because the fact that you give a spotlight to different individuals, I wanted to be the one to give a spotlight to you.
Thank you.
So I'm sitting here in the barbershop, and just so happened, you walk past.
I remember.
And I stood up and I said, brother, I have a podcast, and you said, I'll be on it.
With no problem.
With no problem at all, man. So we're gonna start off like this. So how did growing up here in Chicago shape your perspective and leadership inside a community building?
A little unique because I grew up on the west side of Chicago, on Chicago Avenue.
290.
Back in the 60s, I was born in the 50s. I came up in the 60s. And it was a unique climate. First of all, on Chicago Avenue, I was the first black family to move in that area. Everything was all pretty much intact. So, you know, I used to play hockey with white kids in the alley and, you know, fraternize with them, grew up with them, looking at the Italian guys and being intrigued and inquisitive, trying to figure out what type of a human being that was, because he was a different human being, you know. Me being exposed to my culture and looking at theirs, it was just intriguing because it was different. And as time went on, things began to transition, more black people began to come in. Now this is at a time when Chicago Avenue, we got the north side of the street and the south side of the street. Blacks were not allowed to go on the north side of the street.
Wow.
They had groups like the Jokers and different other white groups that would stand on that side and throw bricks and bottles and call you nigga, and nigga, if you come over here, we gonna kill you, you know, that type of thing. And then you had the, I want to say, tip of the iceberg about the civil rights. You had that starting to bubble. You had bubble until the 60s, but people were starting to talk like that. And in my household, there was a lot of talk about how my parents and my grandparents grew up in Mississippi and how they transitioned up here. So those conversations in itself put something on my mind that made me look at the world differently. Because I had grandparents like my grandmother. I didn't have grandparents. I only had my grandmother. And she would always talk about being in the South and, you know, what it was like. And she would always say, you know, well, for lack of better words, when Mr. Charlie would come and he would come on their land, and her mother would tell him, I don't think you realize you're on my land, but here's what I'll give you some information about. If you step too many feet on my land, you're gonna lose your life.
Wow.
You know, I mean, that's the type of conversation that I was getting. And then when the civil rights came, and I'm looking at black people, now you got Malcolm out here, you got the Honorable Elijah Muhammad out there, you know, now you got Dr. King, and all of this is happening at one time. And as a young person, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at them, and I'm saying to myself, this is a different world I'm looking at on television. But it gave me a sense of courage, a sense of responsibility to be involved in that movement. And when I say that movement, I'm not talking about one particular fraction. I'm talking about the movement of black people for a better life.
Yes, sir.
And that took me off into the 70s, and in the 70s, life started to change. And for young people out there, I want you to know that during the 70s, doing all of these interactions, they began to put the drugs in the community. And once they began to put the drugs in the community, the mindset began to change. And mind you, doing all of this, you got Vice Lords, you got Disciples, you got Black Peace Stones, you got all these different organizations also involved in the movement. These were not gangs, they were organizations.
Oh, they were organizations, yes, sir.
I need to be clear there.
Yes, it's true.
You know, so it was a sense of pride. Each organization carried a sense of pride. You know, and as a young man coming up and watching them, you know, it shaped my view of the world. It shaped my view of what a man should look
Yes,
like.
sir.
You know, what responsibilities a man should carry. You know, so that took me on up into mid-70s, and a lot of stuff happened in between. Then we'd be here all day, but at that
You got
point,
time? Come on. Go ahead.
well, okay, my mother seen that I was, as a young man, 12, 13 years old, I was fraternizing with organizations. You know, my first encounter was with the Supreme Gangsters. That was Larry Hoover. When I say Supreme Gangsters, that's before the GDs.
Okay.
That's gangsters, Supreme Gangsters and Black Disciples coming together. That's how you get GDs. Gangster from the Supreme Gangsters, Disciples from the Black Disciples. So, you know, I'm fraternizing with the Supreme Gangsters, and we had a certain attire. You know, I was up under Babyface, who was Ike Taylor's right-hand man. And my mother saw that, and me not knowing, because we're living west, but my mother, I was born south on the 69th and Union. So I didn't know that my mother was very familiar with the client.
More than you knew, huh?
By far.
Huh.
So when she saw that happening, it must have put some type of fear in her. And the next thing I know, I was in Kentucky.
Wow.
She moved the family to Kentucky. And that was another experience that began to shape my mentality. Because now I'm in the deep South, you know, and I tell you, I'm not exaggerating, where people looked like they lived on a plantation. Outhouses, if they were lucky enough to have running water, it was one of them pipes that came up out the floor and you turned the nozzle, you know, and you had to catch it with the bucket and all of this, taking baths in those big tubs like they did in Mississippi when I was a child. And it just took me back 100 years.
Right.
And that set something in me that created the improper word would be hate. The proper word would be dislike for certain white people because of the way that they were treating black people. And being a young man coming out of Chicago and fraternizing with the organizations, I had one of those attitudes that, hey, I ain't one of you niggas. And that scared the hell out of my mother because I had that attitude. And she was afraid, she being from Mississippi, knowing much better than I
knowing the
did,
situation, yeah.
that you white folks will kill you, boy. You know what I'm saying? You ain't in Chicago.
And so what inspired you to be the voice for storytelling and cultural history?
Well, it's a twofold question and I answer both ways. First of all, I grew up in the Nation of Islam. So, you know, people say, oh wow, man, you dress a certain way, you this, that. It was the Nation of Islam under the teachings of the Honorable Cyrus Muhammad, which gave us the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
That groomed me into that type of a character, to be an exceptional person or strive to be an exceptional person. So my partner and I, he was a book writer, and he said we had been knowing each other for 20 years.
Okay.
He said, hey man, why don't we write a story on your life? Because just like you and I are talking here, and I've been talking for a long time, we knew the ins and outs of my life, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. I think we could do that. So we started writing the story on my life. We got into, I don't even think we got out of the first chapter, and he said, hey, this is going to be a hell of a story, and it's going to take a while. I think we'd be better off if we did a podcast. You know what I'm saying? Then we could bring some of these people that you're talking about and, you know, deliver the story differently.
And that's where I shifted to, because I said this gentleman, I said he has everybody on his podcast telling their story, but who's going to give him a chance to tell his story? And I'm so honored. It's completely a blessing to me to have you sitting here.
I appreciate you, brother.
Because I say God don't make no mistakes.
Yeah, it is.
God don't make no mistakes. And I remember when you walked past, and I was like, yo, I said, nigga, if you don't talk to him,
hey man.
I said, if you don't say nothing to him right now. And then what was so crazy, because me and Delvin had a conversation. So I was getting ready to go interview Pillars Clothing, and I'm sitting there, and we're right there in Chicago Landham, and I'm sitting in the car and I'm looking at the cigar shop, and I'm like, I wonder if that where OG Mr. Rick be at. I said, man, get up and just knock on the door. I said, nah. And then you walk past. You said, don't we supposed to be doing a show together? And I said, yes, sir. I said, we definitely do.
I don't forget.
And that's what's so beautiful. So I just want to ask you, what does being an OG mean to you, and how do you see it evolving?
that is the first question that I like to explain to the audience, because we do a particular thing, it may be perceived as another thing. So I'll give it to you like this. The original OGs, that's not the original gangster. It is the original gentleman
Talk about it.
/ ladies.
Huh.
So the thing that we strive to do is give the public information that will let them see that your journey, it should be the goal to take your journey and lead you into a lady in a journey. See, so in doing that, we wrap the history around it. Because without Black history, there can be no American history.
Yes, sir.
So what we do is we try to communicate with our people, all people, but especially Black people, in letting them know untold history and letting them know what the journey can be like. But the journey is not over until it's over.
Yes, sir.
You know, I've been to prison, I've been a drug addict, I've been a street player, I've been, you name it, I've been. But God is so good
Amen.
that this is what you see now. Because, like I said, you know, all of the interfacing that I did with the different organizations, Nation of Islam, you name it, I done interfaced with it. It took me a while, and this is what I want young people to understand. It took me a while to gravitate to the right space. I had to take all of this stuff and put it together and create a character. And I don't mean a scripted character. I'm talking about my very person.
Yes, sir.
And it took quite a while to do that. A lot of mistakes, you know, but being determined to get to that space. You know, it's like looking down a tunnel, and on the other end you see the train far away, and all you see is a dot. But you know the train is coming, so you keep waiting on it, and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. Then you look up, you're in the light, and the train is there. So what I'm explaining to young people is, don't lose the focus, because if you stay the course, you're gonna make mistakes the whole 9 yards, but if you stay the course of your concept, you'll get there.
Yes, sir.
And that's what's most important, that you get there. But now you have to be trying to aspire to a positive place. Because if you're trying to aspire to a negative place, trust me, you're in the shit of it.
You know, and that's what I learned. It was at one point in time in my life where I was bitter about certain things, about how people that I showed love to and gave love to treated me. So I was bitter and I had this negative outlook. And my immune system stayed weak the whole time. And once I decided to let it go and I forgave people for myself, I started seeing a different light. Because my father told me one day, he said, being nice and being positive takes practice. He said it's easy to be a fuck nigga. He said it's so easy to be negative. It's the norm. And that's what I love. Like, I was watching a few of your clips the other day, and I was watching the comments, and I'm watching these people, and I'm like, y'all don't know what y'all watching. Y'all don't know what y'all getting right here. Y'all getting a piece of peace. Y'all are getting stories from gentlemen who've been through the fire.
Hello?
And now they're dancing in seasons that they could have died in. And people are on there, and I'm just like, you know, I could be the one to say, hey man, watch your mouth. But I said, if I say that, it's gonna stir up another comment and another comment. So I'm gonna just leave it alone and we gonna be at peace.
That's what I do. And you leave it right there. Because see, I'm not here to impress you. I'm not here to cater to your thoughts. I'm expressing me. Everybody don't like jazz. Change the goddamn station. I ain't here for that. I'm not finna lip box with you. I'm not finna do any of that. I've explained it to you. I've been in the streets. I've lived that life in every aspect. I ain't the nigga you wanna play. You know, but I'm a peaceful guy because I don't desire to do that. You know, I don't have 80% of the guys you see on our show. I've had a relationship with them on the other side. And these are some of the biggest people around.
Yeah.
So, once again, you know, I know my way around it. You know, I just choose to live life differently now because I wasted enough of my life living it the wrong way.
And so where do you see Chicago's culture and business landscape going inside of the next decade?
That is very tricky. I believe that until black people begin to understand that you have to go back to the basics. You know, when I grew up, there were no Arabs in our community.
It wasn't.
You understand what I'm saying? Might have been white folk here and there, but pretty much black folk owned the community. You know, like I was saying to you, Dr. Martin Luther King started doing his thing with the civil rights, et cetera, et cetera. In came integration. It flatlined the black community because we started taking our money out of the community, taking it somewhere else. And eventually, if you keep taking the food out the refrigerator and taking it next door to feed people, you're gonna stop.
What you gonna eat?
You ain't, because it ain't there.
Then you're gonna catch yourself going back to the same refrigerator that's empty, looking in and thinking something gonna change.
Hey, now you're forced to go out and beg someone to help you put something in your refrigerator. Not a game, it's refrigerator. You know, we look at Arabs in our community, Indians, Koreans, all these people are in our community taking the money out of our community, putting it in a different community, building a better life, and our life is constantly decaying. You know, this is common sense stuff. You know, I'm not against, or I don't hate any other people, but I feel like they feel. I feed my damn child before I feed yours.
What?
If there's something left over, hey, can I help you? But to think that I'm gonna feed you before I feed my children, you have lost your rabbit mind. It ain't gonna never happen. You know, and we got sold this idea about you gotta love everybody. You know, you got, hey man, you love yourself first.
Indeed. First then, God, then yourself.
Then you spread it.
Yes, sir.
You know, hopefully it's enough there for you to spread. We're in a condition right now, there's nothing to spread.
And then you can't have survivor's remorse.
Thank you.
Once you do it.
Brother, I'm glad you said that. I had that for about 40 years of my life.
Wow. You
know, that's why a lot of my successes collapsed, because I had survivor's remorse, and I'm always trying to give back to someone else that's unfortunate, you know, and it cripples me. I ain't that guy. I don't mind helping after I help myself. Because, you know, we all need to understand that we can help other people after we get our own house.
Because a lot of times reciprocation is a motherfucker, because we try our best to reach out and give, and when we don't get it back, that's what makes us bitter, and that's what gives us survivor's remorse.
That's why the Lord says when you give something, don't look for nothing in return.
If you can't afford to give it, don't give it.
You're blessing someone.
Yes.
They don't owe you anything. There's nothing to come back in return. Now maybe another blessing will come because of your blessing, but if it doesn't,
Yes, sir.
there's something. You know, I get a thrill out of helping people. I really do. That's what this power program is all about. Helping people. You know, we're doing some things, you know, to be able to inspire young people so that they can understand what the journey is, you know, to become an OG or lady.
An original gentleman, y'all.
Exactly.
Don't get it twisted.
No, you need tools.
Yeah.
You know, you can't go and build a house without a hammer. You have to have your tools. So what we're saying to young people is you need to be focused on acquiring your tools as you take the journey. You know, not as a basketball player, you know.
Talk about a rapper.
You understand what I'm saying? I'm not knocking any of them. But what I'm saying is that should not be our.
That should be the first focus.
You understand?
Because we can be doctors, we can be lawyers. I had went to the hospital one time. You know how intrigued and blessed I was that a black doctor came in my room. A black young doctor. Because you don't see it. Because in this day and age, like you said, not knocking them, but that's the first thing that people want their child to be. Is a football player, a basketball player, a rapper, an entertainer, a shucking and jiving. But the whole time, you could be a teacher. You could be a doctor. You could be a lawyer.
Amen. You can be a lot of things that are more realistic than trying to be a rapper, basketball player, you know, sports entertainer, whatever it is. The odds are stacked against you going down that road.
Yes, sir.
But to be a lawyer, doctor, teacher, etc., all of that's available. But, you know, taking that to another level, when we become these things, when we become these things, there are two things we should be conscious of. One is how are we going to use it when we acquire it. The other is being careful that we're not being indoctrinated by the education to still go back and do the same thing at a different level. Because most people get an education and start doing well, they leave the community. They end up in white communities or what have you.
Now, in that, what do you think, like what makes them do that?
I can tell you what makes them do it because I did it. The desire to want better and not knowing and not having the inspiration to make the place where you came from better, to be able to stick with it and think about the next person or people that are coming behind you. See, when we were in earlier days, 50s, 60s, 40s, 30s, what have you, and we had the opportunity to become teachers, the responsibility was accepted that, hey, we must make the children better. We must prepare them for a world that's not kind to them. You can't be equal to everyone else that's in your studying field. The mindset was, you gotta be better in order to playing field equal, you had to be better. Now we have our children preparing themselves to go to colleges that are not equivalent to what it takes in order to break the glass ceiling. You know, and we got to be mindful of that. Just because you get a piece of paper does not qualify. If you,
Some people graduate but be still stupid.
hey, educated fools, Curtis Mayfield said, you know, we have to be aware of that because it is an indoctrinating process. So, if we don't realize that it is an indoctrinating process, then we buy into it, hook, line, and sinker, and then it begins to work against us. And that's what we have to be careful of. You know, when I talk with black people, when I'm talking on the show, I'm trying to communicate something. I'm not looking for you to look at me. I'm not interested in that. I don't need you to look at me. I've been looked at all my life. I've been like this majority of my life, so I get looked at all the time. That's not my focus. I'm trying to give someone who has the interest to take something away from this. Just like you and I are talking. I don't want to sit here and talk about foolishness, man. I don't have time for that. You know, if we're not talking about substance, if we're not talking about how a young person can learn from my mistakes, understand that, hey, I need my tools. How do I acquire my tools? You know, how do I prepare myself for where I'm trying to go? If we're not doing that, then conversation is irrelevant to me.
I had a young lady get mad with me because she said, "Hey, I want my son to be on your podcast." I said, "What did she do?" He said he raps. I said, "Send me his music." Kill a nigga, kill a nigga, kill a nigga, ski mask, kill a nigga. I said, I can't have him on my podcast.
That is so sad, bro. That is so sad.
I said, I can't have him on there. She said, well, why? Now, mind you, me and her, good friends. I want you to post him on your platform. I said, he ain't talking about nothing but killing. I said, then on top of it, he ain't talking about nothing but killing. And I've watched this little boy from the time that he was 5 years old. He ain't like that.
What about that part? Let me add something to that. What our children don't understand, because what you're talking about is a psychological profile. You're talking about kill a nigga, kill a nigga, kill a nigga. You've already been successful because you killed yourself.
Wow.
Did you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
See, you've
Wow.
already killed yourself. Now, you're looking for a physical act, but that's not necessary because you're already a walking dead. You have no value. And then you're mad because the world doesn't want to accept your message. Do you really think that other communities are going to let you come amongst their children with that BS? That's why they protect themselves to keep that out. And we're unprotected, and we produce all of this, and then we're exploited by certain people to indoctrinate our other children. You know, everything ain't about money, man.
It really ain't.
We need money now, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Hey, but everything ain't about money. You know, you're selling your soul for money. I'm not.
Can't do it.
You know. And
It ain't worth it.
But see, there's no sense of reality in that for us. You understand what I'm saying? You know, we don't gravitate to the idea of your soul will continue to exist and your soul will carry a particular weight after you leave the physical body. We're not there anymore. You know, our parents, our grandparents, they were deep there. You know, even though they chose a particular way, and I ain't gonna get into that, you know, but at the same time,
Their morals was totally different.
because they were believing that when they leave this earth, that their soul would be held.
Accountable.
You understand what I'm saying? that doesn't exist anymore. Or if it does, it's very rare.
Super rare.
You know, so we need to get back to those spiritual principles, because that's what's going to give you the edge. You know, I've tried to be a lot of things. I've been Christian, or I ain't gonna say I've been Muslim. You know, I've been this, I've been that. I'm still all of those things, but I learned that it was most important for me to be just a good human being. See, that solved all of my searches. When I accumulated knowledge from all of these different entities, I studied them all. And when I realized that the ultimate goal
Was just to be a good person. So now I ask people at the end of my segments, I give them a few words, and I just want to know their thoughts on it. My first word to you is brotherhood.
brotherhood. That is something that the Nation of Islam taught me in its purest sense. You know, brotherhood is different from conversation. Brotherhood is a bonding that especially us as black people need to gravitate back toward, because all of the mechanisms are entwined in brotherhood. The
Yes, sir.
support factor, community factor, building a future together. All of these things are in brotherhood, you know, as not excluding women, you know. We have that part of us too, but we're just
So basically what you're saying is that brotherhood is not what you speak, it's what you do.
it's everything that you do, and it's everything that you become.
Yes, sir.
See, you can't talk something and don't become it. See, if you're not expecting to become it, then it's all fine.
Yes, sir.
It means nothing. Why would I walk around with a basketball every day?
I'm gonna go play baseball.
You understand? I'm practicing in the snow. I'm doing all of this. You know, it's like when I speak public, I tell people, I say, you know, if I gave you one of the best tennis rackets in the world, custom made, the whole nine, scientifically designed, the whole 9 yards. I gave you the best tennis shoes. I gave you custom made balls, the right gear to wear that's gonna control your body temperature, everything. You're top of the line. And I take you and put you on a football field. How did that work out? How did that work out for you? You're playing the wrong game, man.
Yes, sir.
See, we have to understand these things. We're playing all these different games, and we're disappointed at the outcome for two reasons. For one, we're never really put in the game. For two, we've practiced the wrong game.
Mm.
So when we get to that point, you know, it's like a football player playing basketball and he's just knocking people down and running them. What are you doing?
Mm.
That has become us. And we have to do our best to reverse as much of that as possible.
Yes, sir.
You know,
Chicago.
when you say Chicago, elaborate.
As your home, as your stomping ground, as your peace, as your sanctuary.
When I was a young man, I thought there was nothing greater than Chicago. I did a lot of traveling. I went here, I went there. I was so proud to be in Chicago. And I loved my community. I loved our culture. You know, I loved the attitude that we had, you know, the spirit. I loved it. Today, I'm fractured. I'm concerned because I feel like they've sent us down the right road.
Wow.
You know, all the murdering, all of the negativity, you know. There was a time when I grew up, I don't know. Hey man, dude, I ain't mad at you. I ain't got nothing to do with that. But here's what I'm saying about me. When I was coming up, and I saw the guys on the corner, and I saw the guys going to work every day, I saw something that gave me a format, a roadmap to say, that's where I need to be trying to go. You know, the norm was, if you walked out of the house, your father, my father, and you didn't have a suit and tie on, and a hat, and an overcoat, and some gloves, you were improper. You know, and all of, see, when I say that, you know, when people look at me, hey man, how you doing this, that, and the other, it's not just here. It has to extend out through your whole life.
Yes, sir.
Everything you touch should be inspired. Everyone you meet should be inspired. You know, when you walk away from a person, they should say, wow, man, that was cool. I really like that guy. Or I really like that lady. Not because I was trying to get something from you, or I was trying to speak around you and wink at you, the wife or the girl or whatever. None of that. Just you as a good person, your spirit just spilling over saying, hey, that's a beautiful day. You know, that used to be in Chicago, to answer your question. Today,
Fractured.
very much so. And I'm not trying to put the blame on anyone, especially our young people, because when you think about it, what they grew up in, what was presented to them, is what they know. When you're sitting back and you're watching the internet all day, or you're watching television, or you're watching whatever, and these images are coming about, and you got people out here acting out these images, then what do you think you're going to do?
I know, right?
Yeah, same thing I did. Shit, I wanted to mimic what it was. I thought that was really the thing, until I became mature and realized that, hey, this is bullshit. You know.
One thing I can say is that you're fractured, but you're not broken.
Oh, they ain't gonna never break me, bro. That's not even optional. You know, when I was in the military, we didn't get to that part when I said the 70s. I was in the military in 1976. When I got in the military, I was intrigued. I had done some boxing before I went in the military. But then when I saw that boxing was available, I wanted to become a boxer. I became a boxer. I became a champion. You know, all of that put something in my mind that I wanted to come out back to Chicago, and I wanted to give it to him because it was so pristine. One thing about that man's military, whatever branch you go in, zero tolerance for bullshit, extreme professionalism, you know, extreme discipline. These are all the things that we're missing. And remember, there used to be the draft, you know.
Yeah.
You would go in, you know, you serve your time, et cetera, you may go to combat or not, you know. Now, you know, they make it so difficult to get in the military because they've stripped all of that from us. See, when this country was first started, and a lot of other countries were started, it was mandatory that you go in the military. Why? Because they wanted to discipline society. So you go in there, you get disciplined, you come out here. That's why most of the politicians and police officers and all of that, they've been in the military. Because they require a certain discipline. that's something that they've stripped from us. It started with, nobody tell me shit. You're in trouble. You're in trouble. When you make that statement, you're in trouble. If can't anyone tell you anything, you just told me that you're a bubbling idiot.
Because you gotta be teachable.
If you're not teachable, what else can you be? There's nothing left for you but idiot. A basketball player. Someone has to teach him.
My last word for you. OG Mr. Rick.
I would approach that with who is OG?
Yes, sir.
OG Mr. Rick is the father, brother, community, I don't know the word activist, but concerned community member. Mr. Rick is more concerned about the legacy and the history. Because if there is no history for us to pass on, then we're just going to start recreating and creating. You know, so Mr. Rick is the person that has taken the responsibility to do his part in trying to show where we came from, where we are, and where we desire to go. I have a 4-year-old daughter. Really?
Okay.
I'm so concerned
Wow.
with what type of person she's going to be. I have other children. I have beautiful children. You know, they've all graduated from the best universities, the whole 9 yards. They're doing well in life. My youngest son, who's 20, is at USC doing his thing. You know, they're professional students. Really, because of me. That had a lot to do with their mother. You know, because I was a street guy. But I want to be able to guide people in that manner that when they come out on the other side, they have value.
Yes, sir.
You know, without value, you don't need to be here.
But I'm not gonna hold you.
Hold me a little longer, brother.
Today, this gave me a lot of value.
Good. That's our job.
This gave me an immense amount of value.
I appreciate it.
I can say 2 and 4, your 4-year-old daughter, just have a father like you, she's gonna be just like that.
I don't even want to start talking about my brother. That's an amazing thing for me. You know, I'm going to expound on that. If you allow me.
Yes, sir.
My daughter, when we first started, my partner and I, when we first started this journey, my daughter could fit in both hands. Now, my daughter comes on the set.
I bet.
You understand what I'm saying? She's so comfortable with it. My daughter, no matter where she goes, if someone starts recording or filming or taking
She owns
pictures, she goes into a phase. She understands what the moment is. You know, the game, I think it was, and we were finishing up or either doing the interview with Malik Yusuf. He couldn't believe it. He told her, I learned my ABCs, yada, yada, yada. You don't know your ABCs. She said, what? Yes, I do. He said, can you sing them for me? She looked at him like, you must don't know who I am. And boy, she cut up on him. And they got together. It's on the film. It'll be out today. And he started doing this and that with her, and she went to singing ABCs. And hey, man, that's just her. That's all I'm saying. And what I'm trying to express, brother, is if you give them the exposure, then they will gravitate to it.
Yes, sir.
It becomes natural. She has become a natural. She's not scared of the camera. She's not scared of the set. None of that intimidates her. When she walks on, it's like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing. I'm ready. She'll hit the stage. She'll start singing. And I don't mean just, no,
She sang.
She goes into a thing, brother. It's showtime. That's her mindset. And last of all, I ask my daughter all the time, I say, who are we? She say, we the OG. We the family of the OG.
No doubt about it.
No doubt about it. She got clothes, her mother makes her clothes, and all OG on every, man, it's interesting. That's all I'm saying. You know, I don't want to brag on my daughter. But,
Brag.
you know, I am proud of my daughter.
Yes, sir.
I feel blessed. My point is, I feel blessed for her to be exposed at such a young age, because had I been exposed, and you may feel the same way, had I been exposed to something like this at a very young age, it would be a whole
And in the midst of being in this a whole nother game, I just want to let y'all know that y'all could have been anywhere in the world. But y'all here with us. The Cut Up, Kings Collective Podcast, Ollier's Barbershop, Mr. OG, Mr. Rick. I'm honored. And we out.
Kings Collective Podcast. Get in tune.